I think I have the first item today, so I can just get started if that sounds good. Yeah, so I think one of the thing I wanted to talk about was I think Substrate Java right now throws a lot of runtime exceptions for like internal errors, which is a little weird from like a library perspective, I think, in Java. And it would be nice if, I guess this is more of a like if I started moving and we started having a like check hierarchy of like here's a substrate exception and sort of shifting our errors over, that would be a contract change, but it would mean that we could slowly migrate it to kind of have checked exceptions, so it's a more well-behaved library. Admittedly, Calcite throws a lot of runtime exceptions under the hood, so Isthmus would be less beneficial there. But I just wanted to ask about that before I did any kind of work towards that.
Just
I'll take silence as no objections.
yeah, I mean, you're suggesting switching from runtime exceptions to checked exceptions, which have to be explicitly caught, if I remember, in Java.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the main difference.
Yeah, I don't think any of the major Java contributors are here. Maybe shoot a message on the mailing list as well.
Yeah, I'll do that.
I would think James and Jacques would probably want to weigh in a little. Matan, I guess you've been using Substrate Java, perhaps indirectly, but some. Do you have any opinion?
No.
All right. But yeah, I mean, assuming there's no, if there's silence as well on the mailing list, then I would say go for it.
Cool. I think the next item is David's, but I feel like he's got he's spending some time in another meeting, so I think I can speak to his first item. He's talking about increasing PR velocity. So it looks like he's looking at PRs that have are just missing PMC approval. I'm guessing these are spec PRs. And he's talking about if we start, even if we started adding labels, would that be enough to get things moving? This would be a question for Weston.
It would help. I've taken, yeah, the last 2 weeks I was kind of not paying as much attention, but now I'm trying to get back into things, and it isn't clear which PRs are awaiting PMC approval. I think the last time I went through, some of them kind of needed some help, but yeah, labeling would help. I added one label, the awaiting PMC approval label, which is yellow, and right now it's attached to, looks like 2 PRs. Go ahead and I can't speak to whether it will be enough or not. Probably labeling in addition to, if I look at them and I see that we need a second PMC approval, I can ping someone.
I'm a little unfamiliar, I guess, with committership at Substrate, but do all PRs have to have one or more PMC members explicitly approve every PR?
The
I guess
challenging one is
go ahead.
spec changes.
Spec changes, gotcha.
So the spec changes require it. Anything else does not, just requires one committer review, which I had started a draft. I guess I could bring it up now. It's not, I was wondering, let me make sure I had actually. Well, never mind, that's a different topic. So I'll leave it at that. Yeah, spec changes require 2. If it's a backwards incompatible spec change, which I don't think we've had at all, it would require 3, if I recall. I could be wrong, but those are the only ones that actually require SMC involvement. Unfortunately, a lot of the changes are spec changes. we could maybe look at, if it's loosening that somewhat. I don't know. Okay, no, breaking changes also just require 2 votes.
Breaking changes in the library or the spec? Oh,
The spec, both, yeah. Oh, no, just the spec. Breaking changes in the, Oh, no, you're right. Yeah, breaking changes in a library are not really called out here. It says non-breaking function introductions 1 from committer, non-breaking extensions and non-format code. Okay, non-format code modifications just require 1 committer, whether they're breaking changes or not.
yeah. I mean, I think because we're still pre 1.0, we don't really have any strong guarantees about stability. And I'm not intentionally breaking Java compat a bunch, but I'm fixing a lot of stuff that just doesn't work and not keeping the old stuff around.
Yeah, we haven't in any of the other languages made great strides in the name of backwards compatibility. If it's try to avoid breaking it for the sake of breaking it, but I wouldn't worry too much about breaking changes in the code if needed to advance new features.
But I guess maybe to answer David's question, we have the awaiting PMC approval label, and we can try that and see if that works.
That sounds good. I don't know that it has been used aggressively, but the few times I've thrown that label on there, I will say it hasn't made much of a change, but maybe we can get into need to get into the habit. And then one of those window rail support in Proto, this is kind of off topic, but that one does need a rebase if I guess I can maybe do that.
I was going to ask about that. Do we need to wait for the original committer to do that, or could one of us do that? Because I'm more than happy to rebase it and possibly move some messages around.
I think technically any maintainer can rebase in someone's GitHub.
Yeah, mechanically speaking, you don't need to wait for them as long as they've given you permission, which they probably have. Most people usually do. Then you can do so. Given that this one hasn't been touched in so long, I would say go for it.
Okay. I'll do that later today. We're heavily invested in window rail stuff.
Okay. I think the main question that's kind of remaining there is looking for Jacques' opinion. If anyone else, oh, there he is. There was a question, you had brought this up, there's a question about the hashing window operation, saying that, yes, there's probably something needed there, but maybe let's not tie it up with this PR. It probably needs rewording and or removal, but as it's written, it's not entirely clear what it's describing.
I didn't understand the ask just then.
That's because I ramble and don't get straight to the point. So I don't know how far you joined in the original discussion.
I was late, sorry.
Okay, no problem. So the original discussion was David has said he scanned through the existing PRs and believes a number of them are just waiting PMC approval. He was going to get more aggressive with labeling that yellow awaiting PMC approval label and wanted to know if that was the right way to go about things, if that would help.
Seems like a good idea. We have to get in the habit of looking for it too, but yes, I think seems like the best possible option.
Okay. If it helps in getting in the habit for looking for it, I could send out just like a weekly email summarizing what's still waiting. I don't know if that helps or not.
I'll just bookmark it.
Okay. Then the specific ask was on the window rel PR. You had asked if because the old kind of,
I'm fine with not dealing with it.
okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably fine. If we decide we want to add it, we can.
Okay. So just add a note there, and then it could use a review. It needs a rebase, but it's a trivial rebase just to the one of the protobuf field numbers that it was using got taken, so need to bump the protobuf field number. Victor had a good suggestion as well, which I think he's going to try and apply.
Yeah, I can commit to doing the rebase today and updating it.
But it's probably in a good enough state for every.
There's a random note. One of the common places where you want to use the alternative window operation, which doesn't use hashing, might be if the original data set is already sorted on the things that you're interacting with.
Got it. All right. Next topic. Let's see. We'll see if David gets back to talk about that topic. Let's just skip over that one. Matthias said he can't attend the meeting today, but the release workflow is failing. Looks like one of the tokens expired, the access tokens. So I believe anyone want to volunteer to take a look at that?
Goddamn automated releases, they're supposed to be automated. You shouldn't have to do anything. I guess it's better than having to go through an Apache release process.
Actually, go ahead and take a look.
Is there an issue for it?
Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Let's buff. Buff is changing a bunch of things. I'd seen a bunch of emails from Buff saying, hey, we're charging for more things and we're changing things.
I haven't followed closely. I think in this case, you can specify a GitHub token for Buff to use, and we had, but it's saying that the token is set but not valid. So my guess is at some point someone went in there and stuck in an API key, and that API key expired.
Fuck if I know. Probably was me or the missing Philip Cloud guy that used to exist.
And I see the secret, so it's probably
Sorry, you cut off there.
creating a new token. Oh, there is a secret for Buff token, so it's just a matter of creating a new token and assigning it. I'll take care of this. Just have to remember how to make a token on behalf of a organization.
It's just GitHub shenanigans.
Looks like new things got added to the agenda. Oh, well, since you're here, you want to restate your first ask, Victor?
Oh yeah, I was doing this on the mailing list as well, but I was talking about Substrate Java froze a bunch of runtime exceptions right now for internal errors, and I think as a library it would be better behaved for some checked exceptions instead. I think it's somewhat weird from a user perspective to have it blow up randomly and not be having any indication of. At the same time, it uses calcite, which also throws a bunch of runtime exceptions, and I'm not going to overhaul that. So it would be somewhat not. It wouldn't give us everything, but it would just be nicer if it was more well behaved.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a pretty good split on whether or not checked exceptions are a good idea or not in the Java world. Since you're the biggest users of it right now, I think whatever you guys want to do makes sense. But I think the main comment that you made, I don't think it's so. I don't know that everybody agrees that it's so black and white. The checks exceptions are a more well-behaved library. So I'm honestly, I haven't worked in Java in the better part of a year. But yeah, so that was, I think that was a conscious decision. I think they throw descendants of runtime exception, right? But not runtime.
Yeah, they throw exceptions of runtime exceptions.
Yeah. So I think that
what
was
we basically do, like we have like a substrate exception, and everything that we throw would be a subclass of that. So you could just catch the top level substrate one wherever you use it and be like, okay, this may fail.
Yeah. So anyway, I don't have a super strong opinion. I've gone over the life of my Java career. I went from one side to the other, where I believe that all expected exceptions should be checked exceptions, to a situation where you get into a situation where you've got like these ridiculous function calls which have like 35 checked exceptions, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna start rolling these up, and then you start like, yeah. So anyway, so I don't have a strong opinion. I think the main thing would be is that if there's anybody else that's working with a Java library, making sure that they're feeling good about the change.
I'll ask about this in the mailing list as well, and I'll ask around at work, because I'm not the biggest Java expert. It's just kind of based on my understanding that generally you want, like in server applications, I'm perfectly fine with throwing runtime exceptions, and like my top level event handler, I just go like deal with it. For libraries, I'm not quite sure what the standard is. Yeah, it sounds like it's not set in stone anyway.
Yeah, I mean, historically, the expectation was that things that would be normal exceptions would be checked, and abnormal exceptions would be unchecked. So, for example, like I can't read the file, right? Like file not found, that's a checked exception, right? Like, whereas like, memory is corrupt might be an unchecked exception. It's an unexpected outcome. And so things that you could generally give the user insightful feedback on what to do would be checked exceptions. That being said, like more recently, people have been like most languages have avoided the distinction. Even newer languages after Java, right? Like languages that came before Java, like Java's like, hey, we're gonna do this, is great. But I think a lot of the languages came after said, yeah, that was not a good design choice. So I don't have a strong opinion.
And yeah, I think the next item I had is we were talking about build issues, and I'm running into build issues in the Substrate Java library as well. So I've noticed as we're working on it, so we're using this thing called JBull for like, I think we're running Java 17 or something, or Java 15, and JBull rewrites the bytecode to be Java 8 compatible so that people like Spark can use it. It seems to be non-deterministic at times. Like locally, I will periodically get into failure modes where Gradle will complain that I'm using features I shouldn't be using, and I have to clean the build and do various things. And this just popped up because I literally updated the Substrate submodule of the spec in Substrate Java, pushed that to GitHub, and then just the CI build is failing with like, oh, cool. And it's one of those things that's like hard to fix and hard to diagnose. I'm not sure, can we run the test on a different version than the application? Because that might be one way to ameliorate it, because I think most of the nice features are in the test, and we're not using that many of them in the core library. And I might eventually advocate for like moving away from JBull. It just seems to be like a pain in like the ass.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was an argument to be made that like it's best to run them in the version that you're saying that they work on. All right, so running the test in Java 17, let's say, and saying that it works in Java 8 isn't great, because then you're like not testing Java 8. But you can run them separately. There may be an argument to run some of the tests with Java 8 or something like that. I don't know. The push to Java 8 was Spark. I think Spark still supports Java 8, or at least
Mhm.
it did last I checked. And so if we want to be able to work in the Spark ecosystem, we have to work in Java 8. And Java 8 is so far back. It's so far back. And so what Jable does is actually, I don't believe it rewrites bytecode. So in the newer versions of Java, there were new constructs created from a sort of sugared syntax perspective, which didn't require bytecode, new bytecode. Okay, because the compiler could construct from the new syntax historical bytecode. And so what Jable is actually doing is saying, hey, for the things that actually compile to valid Java 8 bytecode, like, so basically inside the compiler, because basically Java has a single compiler for the different versions. It says inside the compiler, it normally says, hey, if this is a syntax feature for Java 17, even if it compiles to Java 8 compatible bytecode, don't allow it. And so Jable basically flips the switch to allow things to be used if they compile to compatible bytecode, even if the syntax is in a newer version. So it's not actually rewriting the bytecode, at least last I checked. It's basically just telling the compiler, yeah, it's okay to use these newer syntax features if they compile to older bytecode. So that's why we're using it, is it was just painful to go back and start working in Java 8 after I've been working in Java 17 for a while.
I do miss a lot of the features of modern Java when I'm working on.
Well, yeah, and so it's like 11 would be not so bad. Going to 8 is quite a long time ago. So yeah, so to me, it's the question is, would we want to drop Spark 3 support, and it's not exactly dropping Spark 3 support. Like, there's nothing that stops people from running Spark 3 on newer versions of Java. In fact, most people do, right? It's more that we would have a higher requirement than what Spark has, which I don't think is the end of the world, but it was a big sticking point at one point for the people who proposed the patch. So if you go back and look at the patch, I think it was Intel folks that proposed the patch, or a series of patches to support the earlier versions of Java. So anyway, so that's the history of Jable. Look at that, Weston on the fly figured out what the actual word was. He's like, oh, it's like babble.
Yeah, took me a second to
Maybe
remember.
it's jabble. Just thinking out loud. Maybe it's.
I think it's meant to be Babel. Babel was the
Yeah, I think it's
TypeScript
like-
tool that
it's like
did the same
Maple, but
thing,
for-
or JavaScript.
It's just
Am I-
in Java everything's J something, right? J unit, J test. So you say Jable, but yeah, it should be Jabble.
Like it's the only issue I have with Jable is sometimes I'm not sure what's Jable. The only issue I have with it is it does seem to it's non-deterministic at times. So we had an issue at work, which is kind of bizarre, which we ended up, this might be our build being an issue, but we ran into a warning which is like record attributes introduced in like 58 class files is ignored in 52 class file. So like it seems like it was keeping some stuff around that it shouldn't have been, which was also causing us problems. But
yeah, no, I agree. I have seen weird things with it. I do agree that that's a downside to using it. I just don't know what like either you strip all of the newer features out.
yeah,
Like what the alternatives are, you strip out the newer features or you don't support the older version. Like to me, it's like, well, those are your three options, right? Like deal with the IDE/CI pain, strip out the features, or don't support the older versions. And all of them have weaknesses,
yeah,
right?
they all kind of suck. And I think one of the issues for this one, I think thinking about it as well, is I sort of know to expect it, and I have some strategies for dealing with it, but they're not like, they involve a lot of cleaning random things, like removing my entire history and just like git history, git clean XDF / like rebuild some subcomponent, and it works sometimes. But I feel like new contributors who try to load the library will periodically run into this and be like, why is this failing? And it's really hard to like diagnose exactly what's going on. I agree that I think going back to Java 8, like feature-wise, would be a pain, but it might be the easiest thing for like onboarding new users. I think most of the errors that I see in the test as well are mostly like var. I think it's var assignment and like record.
Yeah, I think the switches too. That's actually the one that really kind of was most painful. Is I don't remember what the switch statement changes. I know that there's some that we stopped using because they were newer version, but like, yeah, the problem is I can't remember what the differences are between the Java versions, but I think the switch statement expressions or something. There's something there that's crappy in Java 8. Like maybe it has to be literals in Java 8. I don't remember.
I mean, maybe I can start with just trying. I know you mentioned that. I mentioned like running the test. I think a lot of the failures are in the tests. The tests use neurosyntax in the core library generally, I think. So it may just make sense if you run the test in like a more modern version that may work around this. But then to your point, it's not running the, for Java 8 compatible, we're not running the test in Java 8, which could be a problem. I guess it's not a nice solution for this, is what I guess is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I will try that.
Alright,
Just CI a bunch.
Someone had started to add window function details to the agenda.
Yeah, that was also me. So we've been looking at window functions at work, which is I've been poking around a lot more than normal. But one of the things we noticed is specifically around the offset in the window function for partitions. For both rows and for rows specifically, it's usually a non-negative, technically speaking, an expression, but I guess we can constant fold it down. But for range, sometimes the data type of the offset can be like a date time or an interval, which isn't something that's kind of present now. So right now, the window function offset is like can only be like I think it's an int64. But in practice, I think with range expressions, you're allowed to have like date times. This is based on the Postgres like spec that we've been reading. Looking at spec, the documentation. I'll find the thing I'm looking at.
Now, are you arguing that it should be sort of a literal instead of int64, or that it should be an expression where the bounds are determined on like a per row basis or something like that?
Sort of not on a per row basis. So there's some language here. Let me find the actual thing. There's some language around what's allowed in expression in the offset for rows, and one of it is you're allowed to have, in Postgres at least, expressions that don't contain variables or function calls, which I take to read as yeah. I think you're effectively allowed to put things up.
No, that's a function call. Or that's an operator from their perspective.
What is it? Or
that's probably an operator. So maybe that's what's allowed, is that you can do like you may be able to say date plus 1 month.
Yeah, I'm guessing it's like constant, things that can be folded down as constants effectively.
It's funny, no function calls. That probably allows operators.
So that's one of the things, and that's like for, I think for, where is this?
This is like a constant expression. So you can put math in there and things like that, but it can be folded down to a constant at the end of the day.
Yeah, here, I'll post it in the chat and I'll post it in the.
Yeah, I mean, there's just a lot of scenarios where you use date literal math, because that's what humans write. A lot of different stuff, that shit.
Yeah, and actually, so the language specifically in range mode, the data type of the offset expression varies depending on the data type of the ordering column. Like for numeric ordering column, it's specifically the same type as the ordering column, but for datetime ordering columns, it is an interval.
Right, because yeah, it has to be something that you can add and subtract to the order column. Or compare, wait, an interval? Oh, that is odd. Yeah, you think it would be the min day and the, oh, no, you're right, okay.
I guess it's like the example they give is, for example, if
Is,
you were
is
to
that,
call it-
so here's a question, Victor. Is that consistent across databases or Postgres is crazy? Because Postgres is just crazy sometimes.
That's what I don't know. I need to do like more investigation, but that's kind of the thing that we've started finding is that.
I would think anything that supports range mode would operate in that way. Because that, I mean, that's the only way, because range is take the current value of the row, add some kind of offset to it, and subtract some kind of offset to it to determine your window. So if you're adding and subtracting to a value, and the value is a date time, you can't add two date times together. You have to add date times with durations. I don't know how many other engines support range. It looks like Snowflake does.
But they don't support this. I was just reading through that.
You're right. They say they only support range as in the same value as the current row.
Yeah, or between this and the end, or between this and the beginning.
And window SQL Server is the other one that's usually has pretty good documentation on these kinds of things.
Window frame extend.
Rows or range.
Yeah, so it looks like they only support integer. Because integer is basically like 2 rows back, 2 rows forward. Like it's a,
Yeah.
like it's not +2 -2. It's actually like it's not a mutation of the value. It's actually like a literal.
Yeah,
Right.
it's how wide is the window that you're evaluating the window function on in the
Yeah.
partition.
I want this for like 5 trailing rows or something like that.
SQL Server is the same as Snowflake. The window frame range ... current row. Wait, the range calls logical limits to rows within a partition. Oh no, never mind. So yeah, that would be. They don't actually go into the detail that Postgres does.
The way I read SQL Server stuff is the integer only.
No, it does seem like at least looking at transact SQL, which I don't know if that's SQL Server or whatever thing that is.
That's SQL Server. Yeah.
Yeah. Their grammar only allows unsigned integer literals.
Yeah, so I think that's Victor, is this because you were having to compare it to Postgres, or is it because you actually are frequently using this feature and are like, shit?
No, it's mostly because I've been looking like for full context. I have not been looking at window functions at all at work so it hasn't been something I've been working on, and then until recently I'm like been called in to look at this, and it's been like, okay, so it's been me learning about window functions in an accelerated fashion for the last week, 2 weeks, and just kind of understanding some stuff that's not quite there. I think the window bound thing I pointed out in the window rel PR is probably a bigger one, but I've been looking at kind of the offset and whether it can do everything that it can do everything that's needed based on this. It's based on the SQL standard, but I also don't know what the actual standard is. We mostly go off Postgres, which is not, to your point, it is very much its own thing. And I'd probably look further at other engines to see exactly what they do and do not allow before proposing any changes to the offset.
I mean, I imagine this would be very common in time series databases because your order column in that case is normally a date time. And they have rather, I've worked with some people that have worked on time series databases, and they have things that are similar to window functions, but the bounds are determined by UDFs, essentially. It's like range, and then they want to determine with something like trading days. So, you know, the range of the window is 3 trading days prior and 3 trading days after the current order time or something like that. So there are even more exotic definitions of windows that you could find. So it might not hurt to make that an extensible thing, where it's sort of like rows is basic integer, range is basic integer, and if you want to do something fancy, here's an extension point where you can drop in a protobuf any and put in kind of whatever you want there.
Yeah, that would actually work pretty well if the offset is one of like either a straight offset or something else. I think the TLDR first. I think I need to go back to the drawing board to understand how much of this is standard versus not. And if it's not standard, then yeah, an extension point is probably the ideal, is the thing to do.
And it looks like DuckDB doesn't have rows or range yet.
They have window functions?
Oh wait, they do have
Oh yeah,
rows.
I'm sure
Okay.
they do. They got to run TPCDS.
Oh no, they've got range between interval 3 days preceding and interval 3 days following. So they mimicked Postgres.
Got it.
Yeah, 3 days preceding.
It's an interesting question whether we would want to allow expression or just say it's in literal.
We could also push it to the consumer, to the
the producer to say like, hey, collapse this constant.
yeah.
Yeah,
There's also kind of how I read the offset where it's like, oh, if you have 3 days preceding, you can. But also, actually, 3 days preceding, like the offset is like the number of rows offset. I don't know what like it means to have like between interval 3 days. I don't know how you collapse that to like a number of rows.
Oh no, I don't mean collapsing it
It's
into number of
not.
rows. I just mean like if you said like you know, foo plus bar, like you would say 2 plus 2, right?
Mhm.
Like, do we need to support an expression which is 2 plus 2, or do we just say support 4?
Yeah. I guess yeah, constant
For
folding
rows,
there.
I would say.
Go ahead.
I would say don't support expressions in those cases. I mean, producers should be able to do that kind of constant folding, and we've traditionally tried to make things easier on consumers. And you know, this seems like another case where you're not really gaining anything, and now you're putting the burden on the consumer of having you know, the ability to do this constant folding instead.
Yeah, I mean, the only argument sort of in conflict with that is that, like, let's say a use case where we wanted to do, say, views, right? The use case where we were trying to pitch Iceberg to use us for view representation, where you want to kind of keep the spirit of the original expression alive. Like if you wanted to potentially go back to SQL.
Okay.
Like, I'm not. That's not a strong argument against what you're saying. I was just thinking about that sort of like bidirectional. Like, I don't know how many of you guys have thought about taking Substrate and going back to SQL. That's something I think about quite a bit.
I think implicit casts would be another, like it seems on the same level as implicit casts, which is the SQL, the original SQL is going to have implicit casts in it. They're not going to be explicit.
Yeah, that's fair. Kind of. It's a little different, right? Because in one, we're adding stuff, and the other, we're taking stuff away. Right? If you have 2 plus 2, we're taking it away. We're taking away the fact that you're doing math.
I don't know how much, math gets done to calculate like a rows versus a range. But to answer your question, Victor, the 3 days preceding and 3 after, it's not a fixed number of rows. The window changes for every row. So it might be 10 rows for this row and 50 rows for a different row.
It's like it's 3 days relative to the current row.
Yeah.
Ordering field.
I mean, we could introduce another exotic definition here. We could say if the order row was a string column, then you could say sort of like substring it down to like the first 2 letters. So all of the ABs are one window, and then all of the ACs are another window. And all of the ADs are another window.
Yeah, we could do that. I think Weston, he moved companies and now he's lost his mind. All the anxiety of the old company went away and he hasn't created new anxiety for the new company yet. So he's just a happy man.
That's the problem with writing a database, is that you can choose any exotic behavior. Cool. This gives me enough information to kind of proceed. Thanks for the discussion. It's been useful.
And thanks for the summary, whoever wrote that up. All right, looks like David lost his connection and can't rejoin. So we will perhaps, he's looking for reviews on his PR modifying the homepage. So if anyone can take a look at that, I will try and get to that this week as well. What do we think about adding a bit more jazz to the homepage? Take a look at the Apache Spark design for inspiration.
Jazz.
Yeah, kind of, they're different categories of jazz.
I'm not hearing any music.
I don't think anyone would be opposed.
I think the problem is that one person's jazz and the other person's noise.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, one of the questions I asked in David's PR is, are we attempting to explain what Substrate the project is, or what like Substrate the format is? Because attempting to say what the project is adds a lot of indirection and is likely to confuse people, even though it's potentially like a more accurate way to introduce things on the homepage. I don't know.
My main thought would be is to say, like, I don't know, the Arrow homepage seems pretty good.
I strongly disagree with that, but okay. I mean, yeah, I think people could, we constantly hear about people who are confused and have absolutely no idea what Arrow is after looking at its homepage.
Well, actually, yeah, no, I think it's fair. I guess what I was saying more is that the way that I've always described Arrow, which I feel like has worked well, is at its core, Arrow is a format and specification.
Yep.
And then as a project, it also includes a bunch of libraries to work with that format and specification. And so my inclination would be to do the same thing with Substrate, right? Which is that conceptually speaking, it starts with the specification. But yeah, the project also includes a bunch of libraries. I think part of the problem with that homepage at Arrow, I'm just looking at it now, and I'm like, the problem is that like, you don't know where to look. Like you don't see the what is Arrow, you just see format libraries ecosystem. You're like, eh. I'm like, if it was one sentence which said Arrow defines the language independent specification and a bunch of libraries that use that, then I think people would be, just give me one sentence. TLDR, what is it?
Yep.
Yeah, so in that context of the block of topic that you commented on in the patch, I think we should strive to that, right? Which is be much more, it's going to be tactical, right? No one's got any energy or focus. And so to me, it's like be very, very tactical.
Yeah, I was going to suggest something along the lines of what I just dropped in the chat, but I don't know if that's what you had in mind, Jacques. If so, I can comment on the ticket with something like that.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say is that the query plan, I'm of a mixed mind on the use of the phrase query plan. I think it's very helpful for database people. I think it's not at all very helpful for other communities. Like as you get further away from sort of traditional databasey thinking, right? Like I don't think that people say like, you know, like Pandas creates a query plan. I don't think
it doesn't. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't think they even mentally model it that way. And so saying that you can describe pandas operations as a query plan is very, I think, maybe just not the language that whole community uses. And so that's why I'm like, I don't want, like, one of the things we try to do with Arrow, for better or for worse, is try to balance that sort of like database centric view and the data science centric view. And I think it would be good to try to do that here. So I think that putting query plan up front, like,
Okay.
I like query plans. I think of it as query plans. I just
Yeah.
try to be cognizant of the different parts of the community. The rest makes
Okay.
sense. It's that's the one part that I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
Protocol for lazy data frames.
Yeah.
that's a whole other mental hurdle. I know. I mean, one of the challenges is whenever there's a like sentence that's like, "What is project? What is thing?" It really nags at me when the answer isn't to like a noun. When the answer is, "Oh, well, it provides this, or it does this, or it gives this value." It's like, no, I just want a noun phrase. Like, tell me what it is. So I don't know how we describe stuff. I mean, we can talk about what it provides, but what is it? I guess is other than a project, is there a noun phrase we can use to describe? What
Yeah,
it
well, I
is?
think format is right. I think format is right, right? Like, it's a format to describe, like you could say for describing data transformation operations or data compute operations. I think that's all right. I think it's just query plan specifically,
Okay.
like, just, I think might turn off half of our audience, or just
Okay.
make them feel like it's not applied to their problems.
Got it. Okay, that helps a lot. I'll comment with something in that spirit. Thank you.
Actually, that might be a good like call out, not for like the top level, but like what, like we have like, oh, it's a data compute specifications. Like, what kinds of things can you what things are representable as like data compute things, like query plans, data frame operations, other streaming pipelines, I guess.
You have to add some more some operations, but yes. Yeah. The problem is that as engineers, we try to have really clear boundaries around things, but projects are organic. Most things in the world are organic. And so it's like, well, it kind of is query plans and some data framing stuff. It's not all query plans. It's not all data framing stuff. It can support streaming, even though streaming is not exactly relational. It's semi-relational, I guess I would say. Like, that's okay because it can kind of express those concepts because we generally think about them as, generally speaking, relational operations. Even so, it's not really set operations. Yeah, so anyway, to me, I think it's one of the problems when you get to this kind of thing where it's like, well, it's kind of this. Yeah, but I actually think, Victor, I think your point is good, which is it's like, here are 3 concrete examples of places where, what Substrate can express, right? Like, the more concrete you make it, I think the easier it is. It's like, hey, communicating, like, a Spark job, like, or a pandas operation or a SQL query. Right? People are like, oh, okay, those are the collection of things that are like data operations. Okay, I get it.
I think that kind of helps moving away from the query plan language specifically. Like, it's the format, you can represent query plans in it, but also like you can represent a lot of things in it if you can shoehorn your system into understanding it. Like, if you can read these trees and manipulate these trees, you can use this.
It's
Yeah,
called the
we've
shoehorn
had
format.
other people come and look at it and say, "Oh, this looks like LLVMIR."
Yeah, no,
plug in.
that's actually the problem. Like, yeah, I agree with the concern there, which is, yeah, it's like it's instructions. Actually, that's what I've used in the past. I don't know if you guys have seen the slide I do where it's Arrow versus Substrate, but I basically say that data, yeah, instructions is probably not better. Now that I'm sitting here saying it, I'm like, it's like human level instructions, not like machine level instructions.
I mean, like, I've been talking to a bunch of people, like, onboarding them onto, like, not even just Substrate, but just, like, database stuff in general. And my go-to example is, like, have you looked at compilers or interpreters before? Like, query plans are just IR for SQL. Like, I don't want to run a query. I don't want to, like, execute SQL instead of turn it into this tree, which happens to be nice for execution. It's all compilers.
Yeah, we probably should have a page on the website at some point which says, like, hey, there are different levels of abstraction of IR. Like, there's IR which says, like, move this data into this register. And there's IR, which says like join these two sets of data. Very different levels of abstraction.
Yeah, I looked at the optimizations that LLVM provides on expressions because I thought, oh, maybe if we somehow shoehorned a substrate expression into an LLVM expression, we could run the LLVM optimizer and then throw the expression back into.
As I said, Weston's in a good place.
Provide would all the optimizations they would provide would be useless in terms of substrate because it's all about like optimizing registers and worrying about cache locality and
unrolling loops, all that.
Yeah, exactly, which is just operates at a very different level. So I'm pretty confident they are two distinct things, but it can be easy to see them as the same thing. And in so many ways they are the same, but distinct enough, I think.
Yeah, you can decompose everything into 1 + 1 equals is 1 + 1 = 2, right? Or, basically. All right. Is there anything else we want to cover?
I dropped a slightly adjusted version of that into the chat, which if you want to pick at that, I'll suggest something like that unless you want to adjust it.
That seems good to me.
Okay.
Yeah, if anyone's bored, there's a PyArrow PR for converting to substrate expressions that could use review.
I think they've taken away my review bit on Arrow. Sorry.
So Weston, just to be clear, that PR that I think you asked Joris to review it doesn't implement extended expression translation for the dataset module, right? It just does like whole query plans into Acero exec plans, or what does it do?
PyArrow compute expression to substrate and back.
PyArrow expressions. Oh, okay.
I'm interested in it now because I find I suddenly need to convert from PyArrow compute expressions to data fusion compute expressions, and substrate is the right.
All right.
So
yeah, Weston's a
I want to
Rust
get that one wrapped
now.
up so I can start working on data fusion side of things.
All right. In addition to losing his mind, he's coding in Rust, so great.
Yeah, whatever was left is now for sure.
Unrelated facts.
Actually, how much support does data fusion have for reading substrate?
It can read substrate execution plans today. It can't read the expression thing, so that's what it's going to add. But another curious experiment I want to run is to use data fusion as an Acero query planner one of these days, just to see if it would work. But being able to, throw Acero up, but being able to wrap data fusion into a substrate in, substrate out optimizer would be an interesting experiment.
I have a similar harebrained scheme in mind at some point for can I drive Trino for substrate, like just bypass its parser and planner. I guess not its planner, but if I could just give it like, here's a logical plan, please execute this.
You should get together with the Athena folks that I talked to them maybe 6 months ago about supporting that, and they're built on top of Trino.
Which folks, sorry?
Athena.
Oh.
I don't think I got any traction with them, but maybe they're looking at it from the perspective of they would like to have more tools work with Athena automatically.
That's good to know. Like this for me is a contingency for a contingency of something we might need, but I'm just thinking about it.
Cool. All right, everybody. Have a good day. Have a good week.